Olave, right?
Trade talk
It
for
got
Olave.
shot down. It got shot down. But of note, last year, following the restructure of Lattimore's contract, it was a big point was made that it was set up in such a way that the payment still allowed them to trade him at some point. And I
Which is
think
a very Mickey
had
move.
we,
Very Mickey
yeah,
move.
I think had we won more games, I think Lattimore is still on the team. Mickey's big thing is always, I'm not in the market of trading players who can help us win. At that point in the season, Lattimore was no longer win,
Yeah.
so it became a reality. As Underhill has pointed out, sometimes these talks are kind of self-fulfilling prophecy. The more you talk about them, the more likely it can happen. If at some point in the season things aren't going the right way with Olave, or you have other
The way we talked
stepping up,
about it on the podcast. Yeah.
yeah, like
Yeah.
I can absolutely see them moving on from him. Especially
Yeah.
they picked up the 50-year option. He's gonna want, that money. Can he stay healthy? Is he going to fit in the system properly? There's a lot of things there, but you have that 50-year option picked up. So even if you move him, there's still a lot of value there because the team does get him for cheap for another year before they have to pay him. So that's something that I can see happen further down the line. But rumors like that don't just start as rumors. There's some kind of reality to it. So we'll see. But young talent, just can he stay on the field?
Look, when I look at Olave, I've always said that he's the most talented receiver we've had since Thomas. And I still really like him, but he's not a traditional X. And for a long time, well, not a long time. For a couple years, you had Carmichael and Allen, and to a degree, Kubiak, who were trying to do something that was already here with a player that didn't fit that role. And what I'm really saying is Kellen Moore, the style that he runs his offense, where you look at it with the Chargers, where you look with the Eagles, he likes and favors smaller, shiftier receivers, not a traditional X. Now, I'm not saying he doesn't use a traditional X, but just that his offense and his version of West Coast is not so reliant on having a Michael Thomas to open up a Chris Olave. So I'm excited to see what Moore can do with Olave, as well as, the veteran in Brandon Cooks and Rashid Shaheed. But like you, I believe that, one, I want to add in that teams make these calls all the time. All the time. You've always got some player that somebody's going to call, hey, is this guy even somewhat, just give me a price. And they'll just say, hey, no, yes. Is Olave a tradable piece? If anything, Olave is the most valuable trade piece you have right now because he has a 50-year option. He's a first-round talent wide receiver. And there's some disgruntlement there, whether you agree with it or disagree with it in terms of like him as a player. I think Olave would be fine going and finding another pasture if that was the case. I don't think he would throw a fit if he was traded. So, yeah, week 6, if you're 0-6, absolutely. Bounce Chris Olave and see if you can pick up a second-round pick. But I don't go into the season wanting to trade him because you want to believe in the quarterbacks that you're creating right now. Right? You want to believe in whether it's Shuck or Rattler, and you want to give them the best that they can have. And the best that they can have is a guy like Olave.
Random thought. You said a little bit more West Coast. I think we see a little bit more Air Coryell this year. I think you see a little bit more vertical than horizontal.
I'm more speaking to like he is a West Coast guy, but the thing I love about Moore is he builds around what the team is. Same thing that Peyton did. Right? Yeah. Peyton was a West Coast coordinator, but at the end of the day, that West Coast really just came down to the terminology in his playbook. He very, very often would pull from various. I mean, y'all saw him run all go special with Drew Brees all day long. Kellen Moore, I think, is the exact same way. And I do agree. Yeah. You'll see more of that vertical stretching. And you need guys like Olave and Shaheed to do that.
You have three. You have a lot of. If you look at the way that the team is built, there's a lot of redundancy in the speed area department. Mm-hmm. So if you look at, you've got Olave, you've got Cooks, you've got Shaheed. Those are, that's 4-3 speed across the board. But then you throw in that you still have Johnson there, who, look, they talked about using him a little bit more downfield, mid to deep. So you're looking at almost a shell of what we had in our heyday when you had Graham, you had Meacham, you had Henderson. There was a lot of downfield stuff that was possible that opened up a lot of things underneath.
Yeah.
Can you see Kamara start to get used more? Because I would love to see things get stretched so far underneath that you give Kamara a lot of time to work underneath. A little bit more option routes out of Kamara this year. We talked about them doing more read option stuff, and I think Kamara would be dangerous in read option, or at least for what he can do to suck the defenders up to open
Yeah.
things up behind them. And so when I look at the scheme, I'm like, okay, I see a little bit more Jason Garrett than I see Linehan,
Mhm.
at least to start. And we know Moore is flexible. He's been in both West Coast and Air Coryell background, similar to Sean Payton. He can do both, but just
Yeah.
from the construct of the offense, I think it lends itself a little bit more to downfield action.
I would agree. And I think that's why you let these rumors of Olave getting traded exist. And again, let them talk about it, because if anything else, here's how it can benefit you. Just like we were just saying, self-fulfilling prophecy. But right now, the prophecy is just the Steelers. But if all these other teams keep hearing, well, Chris Olave is on the market, make it into a bidding war, right? If you want him,
Oh yeah,
pay for him. And again, we're not trying to just dump Olave and get rid of him, but how's the season progressing? I see this as a team that wants to use a lot of motion, wants to use a lot of depth. You need the speed to do that. And that also does potentially open up AK. One of the things that New Orleans did with their all-go special was they would have their ex, Michael Thomas, run a shallow cross. So their all-go special would have Thomas usually in the slot, and he would just cut underneath. I see you doing the exact same thing with AK, right? You can either motion AK out to the left, right, and have him run that, or you can have him go through the B and the C gap and run that same shallow, get him out in space, clear it out with all these all-goes. And again, you can only do that if you have an elite player, because as much as I love Rashid Shaheed is not a complete receiver in the way that Chris Olave is. Chris Olave can run a 7-yard hitch significantly better than Rashid Shaheed. He can run a deep out and a deep cross better than Rashid Shaheed. And again, not talking bad about Shaheed, who has taken tremendous strides as a wide receiver and deserves credit for that. But the same way that Lattimore was always the true number one corner and Adebo was a good number two, same thing with Shaheed. Now, he can take a step up as well, and he can elevate his play. But Chris Olave is a complete wide receiver. I would love to see him in less situations that lead him into getting hit really, really hard, which means less deep crossers over the middle into a floating safety. But hopefully those throws aside, he is the most talented receiver on the field. You can use that to your advantage if your team is losing. But when I have a rookie quarterback, I need him to have a reliable outlet. And I can call Rattler a rookie because he didn't play 17 games. So nobody think I'm trying to pick sides here. I want to see that camp battle more than anything. And heck, Drew Brees talked about it as well, that he likes, he's talked about liking Shuck. He compared Shuck physically to Taysom Hill, but said that the main thing that this team needed was competition, because that brings out the best in both players. And I fully agree with that. But whoever the quarterback is, you need a reliable guy. And I talked about it, an episode ago. I don't believe Juwan Johnson's that reliable guy. You talked about it. Rattler likes Johnson. You saw the last 4 games of last season. Clearly, there's a connection there. But Juwan Johnson has yet to prove himself reliable. Chris Olave is reliable when he's healthy. Keep him healthy, keep him safe, use him. But if the team starts off really bad and it doesn't go how we saw, where they aren't able to overcome some of those teams, build up for the future, man. Get you a second rounder and go from there.
And for those who were a little bit slighted by no primetime games, you have to earn those. It doesn't bother me at all. In fact, it means I'll probably be able to catch most of the games this year in the Dome. You got to earn that. And I think for me, that would be, how Peyton was great at like being this motivational master or master motivator. I think this is something that you can use to motivate this team the right way. Nobody respects us, Rodney Dangerfield, right?
Yeah.
There's ways that you can use this to your advantage. I am perfectly okay with not having them. You earn those, and I like being the underdog. I think it's much easier to sneak up on teams. And I think there's a lot of people and a lot of teams that if you don't follow this team closely enough, you do believe that they were as bad as they were last year. They weren't. I'm gonna stick to that. They were not as bad as what the record was, despite record represents what it is.
Yeah.
This is a team that can catch some people guard next year. How good will they be? I don't know. I do not expect them to be as bad as 5 games only being won this year. I cannot see that happening again unless we run into a similar situation with injuries again and the quarterback situation pretty much like face plants. Those are the only 2 things I can see that would keep us from getting fewer than 5 wins this year.
Trading Olave would also do that too. I think if you traded Olave now, which is why again, it's just the rumor mill, but on the topic, if you traded Olave now, you would immediately take away wins off the table. Because you don't
believe Olave is worth wins?
I do.
You think he's worth? Okay.
You do not have a complete wide receiver besides Chris Olave. Okay. So you have no wide receiver who can run any route, meaning every other wide receiver can be schemed against. Healthy Olave can't be schemed against. Now you can bracket him, but that's basically saying I'm going to devote an entire side of the field to shutting him down. That, by extension, opens up something for somebody else. Brandon Cooks at this point in his career is not that. Rashid Shaheed is not that. Juwan Johnson is not that. There's only one offensive playmaker who plays the receiving position who can earn you that, and that's Olave. Nobody else has shown it. Now, I would love Bud memes. I've talked about him having a second-year explosion. All that can happen. Chris Olave is the only receiver who's a complete wide receiver.
Random thought. The running back room.
Mm-hmm.
If anybody steps up the way that they should, right? Either Devin Neal or Kendre Miller finally shows up. Alvin Moore in the slot. And I think about, the reason I say that is because I watched this interview with Reggie, and Reggie was like, if I had known what I know now, I would have probably played receiver at some point and extended my career. Mm-hmm. And I remember looking at the stats. One of the things that changed, and I'll have to look at it next year, under Carmichael, Kamara spent significantly less time being used as a receiver than he had been previously under Sean Payton.
Yeah.
I think if you can get back to that, that's a dynamic piece in the receiving room that may be under you, or not necessarily in the receiving room, but as a receiver, that could also give you a little bit more of a security blanket for a young quarterback. Alvin has potential to get you 700-800 yards as a receiver. If he's used properly, which if you look at those numbers, those are like number 2 wide receiver numbers. And so I wonder if that's something else that could be opened up from a receiving standpoint, considering we're talking about not having the pieces there outside of Olave.
I think that would be great, but I don't think it helps the Olave situation. Here's why I believe it doesn't. Mm-hmm. If you did have Kamara more in the passing game, which I think is a great idea, that's going to maybe force the defense to run more heavy nickel sets, which is good, right? That you're putting the defense in a position where you're the play caller. But how do you take advantage of a heavy nickel? A complete wide receiver. You don't take advantage of a heavy nickel with Alvin Kamara. So even if you use Alvin Kamara to manipulate what the defense presents, you have to have something that can take advantage of that, and that's where a guy like Olave comes in. And to be clear, I'm not trying to overhype Olave. I haven't seen Rashid Shaheed be a complete wide receiver. He's only been a stellar number 2. Basically, what I see with Rashid Shaheed is an elite flanker, kind of like how Ted Ginn was. But Ted Ginn was not a complete wide receiver, right? Juwan Johnson, he's talented, but he's inconsistent, right? Bub Memes, he's probably going to be your starting split end if you do end up operating a starting split end, but talk about completely unproven talent. Look, I like these guys, but there's only one that you can really rely on going into week 1, and that's Olave. And I completely agree. Whether you're using Devin Neal, who I talked about in the film study, is already a very good pass-catching running back out of the backfield, whether you're doing motion, lining up in the slot. I think Kellen Moore has a lot that he can do here offensively as a play caller. But just AK in the slot does not fix the issue if Olave is gone. Because, yes, that allows you to manipulate a defense. But, again, I just talked about other guys being aging. AK's aging too, man. Like, I don't know if he could have an 800-yard receiving year. I really don't. I think if you had him have that many snaps by the end of the year, if you did have any playoff hopes, you can no longer rely on AK. And I hate to be that guy. I've always been the pragmatic guy. And I love Alvin Kamara, but we can talk about him being low mileage all we want. The dude turns 30 this year. And running backs historically, especially in their 9th year, 30 years old, are not what they were. They never returned to being the all-pro Pro Bowlers. They just don't. So I love AK, and I think that AK can have a 1,000-yard scrimmage year. What I would see as a great year for AK is if he gets 1,250 yards from scrimmage, right? And I think that is made happen by guys like Devin Neal and or Kendre Miller and Chris Olave. But if we have to rely on AK, I think that can work perfectly fine for a few games. But if we're having to rely on him all season, I think that's a problem, not a benefit.
I don't sleep on Donovan Peoples-Jones either. A couple of years ago, I mean, the dude went from, number 2 receiving yards, 61 receptions on 96 targets for 839 yards. Not really much of a touchdown monster, but when you look at his athleticism from the combine, which I think should be noted, 4.40, a 44-inch vert. Let me make sure I'm pulling this up properly. We'll run through these numbers real quick, just from an athletic talent standpoint. 4.48 840, 154 10-yard split, an 11.7 broad jump with a 44.5-inch vert. Athletically speaking, the Saints don't have anything like him on the roster, just from an athletic standpoint. If you can get some production out of him that the teams hadn't been able to get in the last couple of years, Donovan Peoples-Jones is almost, I would argue, maybe like an extra 4th-round pick that may have potential to boom there. I mean, we've got some receiving options in the room. It's, can we get them coached up? Number one, can Olave stay healthy? But can we get some of this talent that's in there coached up properly? Maybe get some second-year leaps. Bub Means did seem to have some secure hands last year. Prototypical-wise, he does have the hand size and the length that the Saints like. I like the way that he attacked the offseason. I will say this: 9-8 is not outside of the realm for this team. A division win is not outside of the realm for this team. A playoff appearance is not outside.
I agree.
Can they get lucky with health? Can this coaching staff pick up the ball with the last one? And then will the teams in the division, like the Buccaneers, will they regress? And then can they stay on pace with the Falcons? And where will they be with their quarterback situation? But this should be a competitive team this year. I'm excited to get a look at them and, see how things pan out. Won't get my hopes up too high, though.
And I think just what you're saying is the best reason to not trade Olave, because there is reason for optimism. I do think it's really easy for us in May, June to get really positive because we're hyper fixated on our players and we're excited. But if you've been around New Orleans football, which you and I have, not been a lot to be excited about for 3 years. Just not, right? Not a lot of hope. There's hope again. The fact that this team has hope is why you sit on a talent like Chris Olave and don't trade it unless you have to. It's why you have that competition. And to your point, why you don't bring in a veteran quarterback, you have hope. Well, let hope play. Give hope a chance. Let's see what happens. And this could all burn up in our faces. We could be 2-15. It could be absolutely awful. But what's different is there's hope. Like, there's a reason for hope. And as all of our nerdy friends know, rebellions are built on hope. And if you're going to win the division again, and if you're going to get back to sniffing playoffs, you're going to have players who can consistently score. And Olave is a guy who has shown that he can be good to get you into the end zone. And we talked about AK just a second ago. The biggest misuse of AK for me over the past 3 years is in the red zone. his touchdown numbers have been absurdly low.
Plummeted.
Look how
Yeah.
Sean Payton used AK. Got him in the end zone consistently. Pete Carmichael, nor
Yeah.
even Clint Kubiak, and I still thought Clint Kubiak was an upgrade over what we saw with Carmichael. Nobody gave AK the touches he needed to score. What made AK so dynamic and had people talking about AK as one of the best running backs in the league is the fact that in 2020 he had 21 touchdowns. In 2018 he had 18 touchdowns. His rookie year he had 13 touchdowns. Right? Last year 8, and that was an improvement. Shout out to Clint for improving, but he didn't even get to 10. AK is the type of guy that needs to be in the end zone 10 times a year. And Kamara can get that if there are people pulling the attention away from that center of the field. And that's why you want to see Juwan Johnson successful. You want to see Olave successful. You want to stretch the field so that it opens up AK. There's a couple of games last year where you saw that work. Remember the Dallas game where AK has a 50-yard screen pass go for a touchdown. It's because the team was actually operating in that manner. They have the talent to still do that. And I think Olave is still a key piece to that. Getting AK in the end zone is just as important as keeping Olave healthy. And remember, Olave had only 9 TDs his first 2 years. Get him a quarterback and get him an offensive coordinator built around that stretching field type. And I think you can see him have more of those shots in the end zone as well.
Got to keep your talent until other talent rises to the top. For now, Olave is one of those talents along with Kamara. You don't really move until you potentially can. The biggest thing that I can think about is I can remember for years people were like, we need to trade Will Smith. We need to cut Will Smith. And I remember the argument from one of the guys on Saints Report was always, but who are you going to replace him with?
Yeah.
And it was a legitimate argument. So who replaces Olave as a total receiver? That guy is not on the roster or has not developed yet. Doesn't mean that can't. Doesn't mean maybe by week 6, week 7, maybe you see some exciting things from other players. But as far as we know right now, the other guy isn't on the roster. Olave is that guy. You keep him.
Yeah, I mean, and I will say I love the rumor mill here. I actually like that the Saints have something that people are talking about in May, right? If you think that we have talented pieces, that shows that around the league, everybody knows that New Orleans isn't as trash as their record says they are, right? Nobody's calling Tennessee for Calvin Ridley, right? They're talking about New Orleans with Chris Olave. And sure, some people are going to comment right now saying, Rev, you're reading too much into things. But talent is recognized around the league. Chris Olave is recognized as a talented guy, just as Marshawn Lattimore was last year, and we moved off of him. Yeah, take advantage of the talent you have, and if you need to trade, because I do agree with you, man, that this is going to be a minimum 2 to 3 year process. I think that's actually what I have given the most grief to Carolina for so many years, is they would hire a coach, give him a year and a half, and then get rid of him. You want to rebuild a team, it's not done in a single offseason. And I still believe this team can have success, but it's not done in a single offseason, right? So keep Olave until you believe that you are better off by trading him. And right now, you're not better off by trading him. You're better off by having him here and hoping that he can help open things up for Alvin Kamara and Neal and Kendre Miller, and heck, give your quarterback an actual target to throw to, because as much as we talk about the offensive line needing to be better, when Olave was out and it was Carr or it was Rattler, there wasn't reliable guys to throw the football to anyway. So all of these different things that we're trying to juggle, like who do we blame? The truth is everything went against New Orleans last year, whether you're talking about coaching, players, injuries, schedule, etc. Right? And there was definitely some times where New Orleans themselves just shit the bed, right? The Green Bay game comes to mind. Rattler shit the bed, but he wasn't the only one. DA shit the bed. Everybody shit the bed. So that just happens. I think that you're better as a team right now. Right now. With Chris Olave on it, keep him. I mean, did I lie, Elias? Did I? Everybody shit the bed against Green Bay. I mean, it's just, you can't, or everybody. It was a full-on Amber Heard situation. Full on. It was terrible. And there was no puppy dog to blame it on. So we got to blame it on who we got to blame it on. And it was everybody.
It was interesting to hear you use that word. I just, yeah. I thought I was
Right.
the only one that had like these momentary slips of word
Well, we
usage. But
said it, we
no,
got to roll with it. But the truth is the truth. And that is the truth. Right? Now, I hope that doesn't happen this year at any point. Like, those are the type of games that, like, when I watched last year, just I knew that we weren't going to do anything because those type of games do not happen when you're a good team. Now,
yeah, fair enough.
we can argue the reasons why we weren't a good team last year. And I think you bring up valid points that the talent's here, that there are reasons that it was problematic, but good teams don't have that happen. Right? You can be a talented team that's still a bad team. That they're not mutually
Good,
exclusive.
good coaching staffs don't let that happen. That's why
Yeah.
I'm putting so much weight on this new coaching staff coming in and hoping that they can, like I said, squeeze more juice out of the fruit.
Yeah.
I I- again, I think this team is far more talented than people think. I think this team is, and we've talked about it, has been better at drafting than most people think. Retaining talent has been kind of the bigger issue.
Speaking on that
But
note,
consistently,
did you see John Jenkins just signed with I think the Ravens?
listen, I looked at it
A
all week. I
nose
went back and
tackle.
I was like, listen, we have and are a good, we have been and are a good drafting team. There's a lot of players that the Saints have drafted that are on other teams as starters. I mean, you can go all the way back to David Onyemata right now. Like, we've been a great drafting team. We haven't sustained the talent. We haven't been able to keep the talent around, but we've drafted well. And there's a lot of players we've had
Yeah.
that, these 8 to 10 year veterans. And that's a long career
Mm-hmm.
in the NFL. I think the shelf life is what, usually about 4 to 5 years, the average life for a player, 3 to 5 years.
Yeah.
So, you're looking at a lot of players that we have that are in the league beyond 5 years. Did we get another one of those drafts? It certainly potentially looks like it. But again, as I said, the draft was about raising the floor of this team. Even if you maybe look at the entire offseason, again, you bring in a Brandon Cooks because you look at how your receiving talent kind of dwindled once you lost Olave and once you lost Shaheed. So now if you lose those two guys again, you still have someone that's a legitimate receiving threat. He may not be what he was back in 2015, but he's still somebody that can stretch the field. And if you time up the right shot, you can go for a touchdown on you too. There's more depth and redundancy there. Even if you look at the defensive line talent, we didn't cut anybody. We added a couple of players. We didn't cut anybody. There's a deep rotation there of very talented players. Some of them may not be on the team come the first game, but I think there's a lot of depth and talent on the defensive line. You definitely increase the talent and depth on the offensive line with the Tyler Redons and then your first round pick. If your theme of building this team was to build the offensive and defensive line, you did that
Yeah.
this year. If that was going to be the heart of your team, if that's what's going to drive this vehicle, you did that. Now can you build on top of that? So as far as the offseason, I think the offseason has been successful. That's why I feel like it's going to be hard for me to see this team hit 5 wins again, and only 5 wins, because I think the floor is higher this year. Don't know about the ceiling. Don't know about the ceiling. But I think the floor is higher because they should be able to handle injuries a lot better
Yeah.
this year, and they'll have a wider selection of talent to choose from. You're not looking at your first guy coming off the bench of something. I wish I could look at the roster right now if I had it pulled up. You go back and look at some of the guys that were going in after injuries. You were looking at like undrafted free agents that were going in, NFL journeymen that were going in after injuries. Now you've got guys that are third, fourth round picks. You've just upped the talent across the board. So higher floor, don't know where the ceiling is, but as we talked about, 9, 8 wins, possibility of 10, possibility maybe lower of 7 wins. I just don't see 5 this year. I'm excited. I'm like, I want to go play dodgeball or something.
If you can dodge a wrench, you can dodge this podcast. Well, don't dodge the podcast. Hit like and subscribe. Look, we love y'all and appreciate y'all, especially sticking with us through the offseason. We're going to be here with you through the entire season. And hope you're enjoying the shows. We just hit you with a whole week's worth of content. Hope you've enjoyed this week's content. And we'll catch you on the next one.
Dr. Patrick O'Houlihan.
Yeah. Right? Who dat? God bless. Deuces.
Peace.